on the weekends just binging, primarily on cocaine. I mean, I did it pretty much every drug out there, but primarily on cocaine, to the point where I was a full functioning, highly functional drug addict in the corporate world by my late 20s.
This is the How to Quit Working Show. Jeff Steinman believes entrepreneurship is the only true path to freedom. That's why he created the How to Quit Working Show, where you'll hear stories, insights, and inspiration from lifestyle fanatics who left their soul-sucking 9-to-5 job forever. Now, here's your host, author, entrepreneur, and ultimate lifestyle fanatic, Jeff Steinman.
Hello and welcome to the How to Quit Working Show. Today we're going to talk to Andy Zitzman. Now, Andy has got a really different story. He actually went from being in, like many guests on the show, from having everything that everybody thinks they want out of life to actually getting to a really bad place, and I'll let Andy tell you about that, and then finally coming back from that place, starting a business, and living his life in the most amazing way that he can possibly imagine. Great, inspiring story. I don't want to talk about it too much. I want to just get right down to it. Before we get to that, don't forget to go over to the Facebook group for How to Quit Working, and you can get there by just going to howtoquitworking.com/group, and that shoots you over to Facebook. That is a place where folks who are starting a business just like you are talking about their ideas. They're talking about what they're struggling with. They're talking about what they need help with, and they're getting that help, and they're getting that inspiration, they're getting that motivation. So just go to howtoquitworking.com/group, click on join group, and then I will get your request approved just as soon as possible, which will be probably very quickly, and then you can jump in the conversation. Now, let's get right down to it. Let's talk to Andy Zitzman. Andy, welcome to the show.
Jeff, thanks for having me, man. I'm excited to be here.
I am glad to have you here. You know, we met a while back, and I thought to myself, this guy needs to come onto the show because you've had a really interesting journey. Because you started out doing high tech sales in New York, kind of in the on the East Coast of the U.S., and that's not what you're doing now. But I think that the most interesting thing about your situation is how you got from there to where you are now. Tell us a little bit about that.
Yeah. So, well, as you mentioned, you know, I'm actually just a good old boy from Michigan, but I moved to New York City when I was 21, and you know, by 24, I got into high tech sales and sales management. It was 99 when I started looking into high tech, and you know, that was right before the dot-com bubble and all that, and I just wanted to get into high tech, and so I kind of forced my way into a Fortune 500 company with no experience, and somehow got hired. And and I had
congrats.
Yeah, it was that in and of itself was a great story. But so anyone out there, don't let them tell you that experience is the only thing that matters. But I get into this company, and I'm young and I'm aggressive and I'm excited and I'm energetic, and I was a hard worker, and so I ended up having a 12-year career with this company, and as I started to really, I guess, thrive, in my career in New York City, I was living the dream. You know, I was making great money, more money than I ever thought I'd ever make, working for a phenomenal company with great training, great, sales experience, working, clients were, the biggest of the biggest out there. I mean, we only sold to the Fortune 2000 at that time. And so it was just a phenomenal experience. But as quickly as I was having success in my business, my personal life was starting to go a different direction. And, I was a work hard, play hard kind of guy. And the playing hard turned into not really playing hard so much anymore. It was I was living what I tell people just because it's in reference to something that's pretty near to today's world, which was The Wolf on Wall Street, the movie. And unlike The Wolf on Wall Street, I didn't do drugs and drink and do drugs and all those things while I was working. I was very compartmentalized. I would get up every morning, 5:30 in the morning, slam my coffee, get fired up, and I'd go do my thing. And I'd work, from like 6 a.m. to 9 p.m. For the first couple of years I was at this company, and I was a workaholic. I was so dedicated to being successful. And I was when it came to business. But, my personal life, I just started, like I said, I was playing hard, but playing hard started to turn into escape. And my whole life, essentially, by the time I was in my late 20s, was work, escape. And that escape was every evening on the weekdays with what I would consider to be more recreational type drugs like marijuana and drinking, to escape, the stress and to be able to kind of slow down and turn myself off a little bit because I was so high energy. And then on the weekends, just binging, primarily on cocaine. I mean, I did it pretty much every drug out there, but primarily on cocaine, to the point where I was a full functioning, highly functional drug addict in the corporate world by my late 20s.
Wow.
And and ultimately, and I still was having great success in the business world. It was a crazy, vicious cycle that I was getting into, and it seemed so obvious now looking back on it. But while I was going through it, it was the way that worked for me at that time, and I was sustaining, as you would say, my man. And I was just sustaining. And, because I was making money and because that was the most important thing in my life, I didn't want to believe that I had a problem. I didn't want to believe that there was something wrong. And so ultimately, fast forward a few more years, and by 33, it got to a point where it did start to interrupt my work, where I did start to miss a day here or miss a call here or whatever, to ultimately leading to the point where at 33 years old, I checked out of work. I went on a 3-day binge, and, literally my boss, my family, anyone that knew me, pretty much thought I was dead. I mean, I disappeared, and I was very noticeable in the corporate world. I mean, I was at that time, touching about 200 people a week within my company. So, and I wasn't a guy that just sat in the background. I was very noticeable. So it was a big deal, man, and I checked out and literally just for no reason. I mean, I didn't know this was coming. I didn't intend to go on a 3-day binge, but when you're a drug addict and you can't stop once you start, ultimately it's going to happen at some point. And, and I had overdosed 10 years prior too and almost died, yet that didn't stop me, So, yeah, so the story is, if you will, I checked out for 3 days. I went on a 3-day binge. My boss thought I was dead. My parents thought I was dead. My twin brother thought I was dead. And, it had what people call a white light moment or a spiritual experience, if you will, as I was coming down off those drugs. And, just knew that it was either I had to do something different. Either I was going to continue living the way that I was living and probably die, or I was going to make a decision to change my life and to, turn it all around. And in that moment, I just had this moment of clarity, and I prayed for the first time in a long time. And I just asked God to help me and to, allow me to let go and just be willing to give it all up if that's what it was going to take. And I was ready in that very moment to just lose it all. I thought I was going to lose it all and give it all up, because at the end of the day, I had all the material things. I had all the money, but what I didn't have was me, and I didn't have happiness. And I finally woke up to, why am I doing what I'm doing? It's not worth it. It's not, I'm not happy. So what is so important about this money and these things if I'm ultimately killing myself in the process? And I went to rehab, man, and my life changed forever.
Well, that's awesome. What a inspiring story. I think what was so interesting was you said early on in your career, before the drugs came along, you were really motivated.
Yeah.
Why were you so motivated?
I think it's a combination of a few things. I came from a blue collar background. My parents both grew up in Detroit, very, very poor. And my dad instilled in me, early on in life, that you're not going to get anything, that you don't work for. And that, the fastest path to success is hard work. And that, if you don't know what you want to do, pick something and do it to the best of your ability, and then figure out what you want to do ultimately in the long run. And I just grew up with that. You combine that with being an identical twin, who was, we were always pitted against your twin when you're growing up. We were both, highly active, highly confident, highly capable, if you will. I mean, I was blessed with some level of intelligence and some athletic ability. And so just early on was just always competing and trying to be the best. And I just had inside of me this desire to be the best. I never really knew why I wanted to be the best. I never really knew what I was trying to be the best at, essentially. I just kind of, whether it was school, sports, or just competing with my brother in anything, I just wanted to be the best. And so that just was part of my makeup and who I was.
It's interesting. You said you wanted to be the best at something, but you didn't necessarily know what you wanted to be the best at. But I'm guessing that now you probably have a better idea. What is it that now you want to be the best at?
Yeah, well, first and foremost, I want to be the best at having, a relationship with myself that's real and honest and conscious. Those were things that I missed out on. I used to have a tagline based on the book Think and Grow Rich with Napoleon Hill, which was whatever the mind of man can conceive and bring itself to believe, it can achieve. And believe and achieve, I never had issues with, but conceive, I kind of had an issue with. I pretty much lived unconscious until I got sober, at 33. And so to now live, to take those same skill sets, if you will, right? The high energy, the passion, the motivation, the confidence, stuff that I was blessed with, that I just, somewhat naturally had, and I took for granted. But to take those things and then add into conscious living along with some gratitude and a desire to give is how I want to live my life and what I want to be the best at. And that's what I do today. I ultimately left the corporate world to pursue my new dream, which was to help other people, including always staying focused on helping myself in a real honest way, right? And not just in service to making money, but in service to being a good person, in service to giving back, and to realize that I was given this second chance, this opportunity to actually take all the stuff that I learned in my journey, not only from a business perspective, but more importantly from a personal perspective, and to help other people out of their own prison to get to where, to their paradise, essentially.
Yeah. Well, what does it mean to live unconsciously, or to live consciously, however you want to say it?
Yeah. Well, it's funny. I mean, you asked me, how were you motivated and those kind of things. I think I was pretty lucky to have somewhat of a successful unconscious journey. And in the sense that I did trust my gut, I did believe in myself, and I did work really hard. So if you have those things, ultimately from the outside looking in, what society deems as successful, you're probably going to be all right, Yeah,
it's like you can do anything with enough brute force.
Yeah, exactly. And so you just brute force it, and you work really hard, and you'll make some money, you'll have success, you'll be, you'll feel good about yourself, if you will, to a certain degree. But ultimately your subconscious and your heart, knows, your self-esteem knows. And so that's what I try to remind myself. And your self-esteem knows when you're not being true to yourself, when you're not being honest with what you really want. And so that game of just going out there and achieving success based on what other people think or what the world tells you, it's not going to last. It's not going to last forever. And at some point, you're going to wake up and realize that you got to do what's in service to your heart, and to your subconscious, to your self-esteem, so that you ultimately feel fulfilled and happy inside. And what happened to me, and what happens to a lot of people, is that before they get to that point where they're willing to make a change, or they're willing to give up the life that they had so they can have the one they want, unfortunately, most of us do some very self-destructive things, whether it's drugs and alcohol in my case, or, being abusive in relationships, or, to oneself or to others, or, the cheating, the lying, the stealing, all the stuff that we see in today's world. To me, it's all a result of essentially people trying to escape a life that they've created for themselves that they no longer want to live in. And instead of making the change to go and create that life, they do self-destructive things.
How does one know if they have that disconnect between who they are and who they really believe that they should be?
Yeah.
How do you identify that?
That's excuse me, that's a great question. I think, I think at some point, for me, how it happened was at 24, right after I started in the corporate world, I had that moment and I didn't listen. I had a moment where I just knew I wasn't, this wasn't my life's purpose, my life's calling. But I was making so much money, man. It was like, it was hard not to, and everyone was telling me I was doing great, so, but I think, to recognize the disconnect is most importantly, it's not necessarily based on something that's outside of you, like not having the job or the car or the house or the, wife or the husband or whatever it is that you value. It's the feeling inside that when you wake up in the morning, can you wake up and say, you know what, I'm doing what I'm supposed to be doing. Like I can feel that this is ultimately what I was put here on this earth to do. And if the answer to that is no, then chances are you might want to spend some time trying to figure out if there is another way for you, if there is another, opportunity for you. And it doesn't mean you have to drop everything and do it overnight and, completely disrupt your world. But if you want to be happy, you ultimately might want to start asking those bigger questions and then doing the work to figure it out.
How do you figure it out?
Well, how I figured it out was I didn't do it with consciousness. I ended up becoming a complete drug addict, and I was almost, I wasn't forced to go to rehab, but I knew that if I didn't go, I was gonna, lose my job, lose my career, lose my family, lose everything. And so, how I figured it out was I did, enroll in a program. In my case, it was called rehab and then AA. And in that program, it had some keys that I think are essential to anyone that needs to make a change. And, the first key was, number one, just admitting, I was powerless, admitting that the way I was doing it wasn't working. Right. So it was just that, first and foremost was just a level of awareness, and questioning of oneself, so that I could wake up to something different. And then the next thing was, accountability. That, no matter what I've done or what's been done to me or where I'm at, the reality is that if I want to have the life I want, if I want to be happy, then, I have to be accountable for my own life. No one else is going to do it for me. And, whatever I've done, I don't have to stay in. I can actually change. And so, there's a level of awareness and accountability that I think has to be a part of anyone's, program and makeup as a person or as a group or what. But the big things that, I think were key for me to waking up ultimately was just completely surrendering to that process, right? So when I surrendered to the process and I asked for help and I was willing to actually get the help and then listen to the help, and pay attention to the ones that, were doing it the way that I wanted to be doing it, that I start to, my entire insides just shifted, and all of a sudden I started to have some hope. I started to see things differently. I felt differently, and I realized that things could actually be different. And then when you enter into a program along with that kind of those components, and you actually completely surrender to a program, it makes it a lot easier to start making change quickly. So, I think any program that, that will encourage change and really help one change quickly has to have the makeups of things like, a mentor or a leader, someone that, has what you want, that you can talk to, you can learn from, and you can model so that you can ultimately create what you want. It has to have community, it has to have people that are like-minded and going through the same stuff or have been through the same stuff, so that, they can be your rock and your strength when you can't do it for yourself. Cause, willpower alone, will screw you every time. If willpower is great. I had a boatload of that stuff when I was in my 20s, and I still became a drug addict, right? But you gotta have community, you gotta have some mentorship, and then you gotta have a framework. You have to have some type of process or steps. You can't just kind of wing it and say, oh, I'm just gonna create this new life and just visualize it and see it, which is all very important, by the way. But, a framework with some steps to say, okay, I'm here. I need to take this step to get here, then this step, then this step. And so, if you can't come up with that framework or the steps yourself, then go find the program or the system or the person out there that has it, that you can at least start to develop a framework and a system that you can try. And, chances are, if you're an entrepreneur, you're going to go through 3, 4, 5, 6 of these frameworks and steps throughout, the building of your business and your new life. And then I just think that there's, the other piece of it is, you have to have all of that combined with now a system for yourself when it comes to your mind, your mind and your emotions. You have to be willing to work on you just as hard as you're willing to work on your career or your new business or your framework or your system. So that, knowing that if you can learn how to wake up conscious, honest with yourself each and every day with intention, that, and that you have to work at that every day. You can't just take it for granted once you start to make progress. You have to actually intentionally work on you so that you can put your own mind into, number one, a positive position every morning, one that comes from power and passion, and then ultimately, continue to work on your emotions as well. So when it comes to things like reactions and anger and negative feelings, how do you actually shift those and flip those a lot quicker in your life so that they don't take you down and out like they did me, and like I'm sure they take out so many people.
Yeah. When we met back in April, you gave us a talk, and you talked about a couple of things that you do first thing in the morning. Can you tell us a little bit about that?
Yeah, I was, there's a page in what's called the Big Book in AA, and it's called On Awakening, and it highly suggests, it's a suggestion. And what's funny, by the way, in AA and recovery, they say suggestions are like. A suggestion in AA or recovery is kind of like if you're in a plane and it's going down and someone suggests that you put on the parachute. So they're just suggestions.
Just a suggestion. Take it or leave it.
I grew up Catholic, and I was very, fairly religious, I would say, growing up. My parents are both very religious, and, I prayed a lot, and I had some level, I guess you would say, of, conscious and, religious spirit growing up. But I'd gone away from that, and I'd completely left that, in my late teens and in my 20s. And, so when I went into the program, it was suggested that I pray and try to connect with, a higher power, something greater than myself, so I could get outside myself. And so how it all started was with that. I just started to pray every morning, and I hated it, and I didn't even feel anything. I didn't believe in it, but I was told, just believe it, that it works for others, in the short term, and then you'll see that it will start to work for you. And so I started to pray every morning, and then, about 3 weeks in, one day, I literally just started breaking down in tears, and it was like the first time, like I kind of felt connected to me, at a new intimate level, because I was, already sober for, a few weeks or a month or whatever. But it was the first time that I felt like connected to something greater than myself, and the power was so overwhelming that I just started to cry. And so I said, wow, that's amazing. Well, as I started to develop further into my morning process, I realized that, it was suggested that why don't you write down 3 to 5 things you're grateful for every morning. And so that way you can start your day with humility and with gratitude, and focus on the things you do have and not what you don't have. So I added gratitude to the list. And then from there, I started to build a little bit more around mindset things that I was learning by reading books and by doing some other personal development. And essentially what I do each morning now is I do a prayer each morning so that I can start with humility and gratitude. I pray for other people so I can also can focus myself on staying true to my mission, which is to give back, because I've been given so much help freely. And then after I go in through that prayer, I go through some mantras, and some affirmations, some things that, will really help me focus with intention on who I want to be for the day. So I'll ask myself, who do I want to be? And I'll focus on, being 3 things, healthy, conscious, strong, for example. I'll focus on asking myself a few questions that I'll need to answer above and beyond who do I want to be? Like, what can I do today? Or what am I willing to now do today? And so that, I'll start to focus on doing some positive things. And, this morning process has grown into setting one intention for the day that I'm absolutely, no matter what, no matter how busy I get, to set that intention. And then I visualize, a success, whether it's an interaction with my fiance, a sales call, or an enrollment call in my case, or just a coaching call with a client, that I really need to deliver the goods. I'll visualize those things, preparing for, I'm going to be doing a talk at my high school this week. So I'll do a visualization tomorrow night, as well as in the morning before I start, and just go through and see myself executing and doing it so I can kind of already be there before I do it. And so I layer all these things on, and I call it my morning process. And the reason I do that is because I used to just wake up and go. Now I wake up and I actually spend some time, actually I breathe too. So I do some breathing before I start all that. So I try to spend some time in some consciousness, around just, where I'm at. And so that I can actually develop and be the person that I want to be first thing in the morning. And then I hope that process, and I do my best to allow that process to then carry me through and set the tone for the day.
Wow. I think that's really cool. Now, a lot of the things that you talked about in the process are kind of specific to you, right? So how does somebody figure out what pieces and what things should be in their morning process?
Yeah, it is very specific to me, and I coach on this, right? And so my suggestions are, to, at a minimum, start with breathing, start with gratitude, and start with, if you're not religious or spiritual and you don't believe in a higher power or God or whatever you want to call it, if you don't believe in any of that, then maybe try meditation, or I tell people, just talk to your soul, have a conversation with you. And because I do believe that when I'm talking to myself and I allow that door to open up where I can really tap into my soul, that there is something greater that's going on there. But if you don't believe that, then just do that. So number one, just breathe for a couple minutes so that you slow down your thoughts, let your thoughts escape you. They'll be there later. Focus on the things you have, which is called gratitude, and remind yourself each morning what you do have, and then talk to yourself, just have a kind of a conversation with yourself about how you doing, what are you feeling, how would you like to feel, and just start with that. And then from there, you can start to, once you invest that time and you start to feel something, right, it will take you, in my case, it took me about 3 weeks. But if you do that every morning for just a few minutes, you'll start to feel something shift inside of you. You'll feel a level of consciousness, a level of self-esteem, a level of probably, what I would say, is like passion, if you will, that will start to grow in intensity. And once it does, you'll realize that you now have developed a process that's going to take care of you, first thing in the morning, so that you can take care of the day the way you want. And then from there, you just have to do the work, which means go read a book. You can read Hal Elrod's Miracle Morning. You can, do some personal development work, listen to some videos, watch some videos, listen to some podcasts, and hear what other leaders, thought leaders, people that you look up to do in their morning process and what they do to set the tone for their day. And then just try them on. Just try on a few different things, and then ultimately you'll develop your own process. But just know that whatever it is, it's more about the process and making it your own, so that you, and I can go even deeper into this, but so you at a minimum can just start your day with a little bit of consciousness, humility, gratitude, honesty, and connection with yourself. And then from there, I add a lot more. I have motivational stuff that I do, inspirational stuff. So then I hit other emotions and things within myself. And then ultimately I end on a crescendo of high energy, because I like to go out of the being state into a doing state where I'm getting all fired up and energetic and ready to really go crush it for the day. But that's just my thing, again, just start with the being phases, which are breathing, gratitude, and talking with yourself, and then just learn from others that you look up to, and try stuff on, and eventually you're going to have a morning process that takes care of you.
Amazing. Now, you said that it takes a while before it takes hold, before it starts to do anything. For you, it was 3 weeks. Probably varies for folks, but I would imagine, based on a little bit of human behavior that I am familiar with, that 3 weeks is probably a pretty good average.
Yeah,
for
absolutely.
people. What would you tell somebody who's on day 10 and they're like, "Oh Christ, this isn't working"?
Yeah, exactly.
Because that's, I think, the real danger zone.
I think that, the person that's on day 10 and it's not working, just say, I'd love to know, if I could speak to them directly, I'd like to know how old are they? How many days have they been doing it a different way that wasn't working? Just to remind themselves that they were probably in enough pain or wanted something bad enough that they were at least willing to try this and to just, complete the process. And that also what they're actually feeling, that resistance, is probably part of the process. Our minds are so crazy, right? At the end, whenever we decide to do something new or different, even if we want to do it, there's going to be resistance. And as soon as you start to make progress, the antagonist will appear, resistance will appear, and you'll have that little voice inside of you that's saying, no, this isn't working, this is BS, don't do it. I was that exact way. My prayer, Jeff, 10 days in was, God, I don't believe in you. I don't even know why I'm doing this. I think it's so stupid. I'm so pissed off that I have to be doing this right now, but I know that my way wasn't working. And the people that are staying sober and that I look up to told me that if I do this, it will work. So that's why I'm doing it. Thanks. Have a nice day.
I know that my way wasn't working.
And I reminded myself of that every day. Yeah. So that's you got to put in some of those things to kind of, so if you get used to saying that 10 days in a row, right? And all of a sudden you wake up on the 10th day, you don't want to do it, but then you do it and you tell yourself, you basically just answered your own question in your own process,
Yeah, so, yeah.
I was pissed, man. I didn't want to be doing it. I didn't want to pray. I didn't want to admit that I was a top dog in my company. To have to be humble, and to admit that I had this problem was so embarrassing, and so it was awful. And, at the same time, I was willing to do anything because I knew it wasn't working, but it was tough, and I was pissed, and I was pissed at God. And I, used to tell God that in my prayer. And then one day I started crying and I realized God might be working for me.
Amazing, amazing stuff. Andy, how did you take it from that place to a business?
Yeah, so ultimately I did go back to the corporate world for a few years. My company stood behind me and I felt obligated to kind of finish the task, if you will. And yeah, and I got to be honest, I wasn't a guy that hated my job. I actually loved what I was doing. For the most part, I loved my company. They stood behind me. I was really good at it. But even though I was good at it, and it was a great company, I knew before I got sober that it wasn't my calling. And once I got sober and got a little bit of time under my belt where I was practicing this conscious living and asking the questions, what do I really want my life to be about? What do I really want to be doing? Is this really the most noble thing I could be doing, right? Selling data storage to companies, high-tech sales. Is this really? And so the more I just asked that, and I spent the time on getting sober, it just became very clear that, what I really loved doing above and beyond all of that was helping people. I helped a ton of my friends, my family, and even mentoring a lot of people in the corporate world, where that's what I realized. And I haven't gone through your program, Jeff, but I've learned enough about it to know that there's some things that you do to take people through this experience, right? Where they have to get clear on what it is that's going to serve them. You know what I mean? Mm-hmm. And so even though my sustaining portion of my career in life was pretty good financially, those were the same things that ultimately led to me being a drug addict. I wasn't happy. So I just, I had to get real with the fact that, I don't have to do this. This is something that I've been doing for a long time, and I feel like I'm locked in, and it's the only thing I can do. But I just knew that there were other things I could do. And so when I started asking the questions of what else could I do, and got real clear that what I loved most above and beyond making money and closing deals and the high energy of this job was I liked helping people. And as soon as I was the one getting helped, and started to experience what that was like and how much love I had for these people that were just helping me for free, basically, I was like, man, I want to do that. If I could make money helping people, that would be great. And if it could be more about me helping people first and making money second, third, or fourth, not being the number one reason why I do something, then I would bet that my life was going to be a lot more fulfilling, and I'd be a lot happier with myself about what I've dedicated my life to.
Amazing.
And so, yeah.
And I sorry to interrupt, but I would actually say you can't make money without helping people. So what a great thing to do.
Yeah, and I had to shift the mindset too. I mean, the money was, when I had to look at the corporate world, it was great, but the reality was I lived in New York and then ultimately got to Boston and worked for this company, number one for the money, period, And so, if I could, get honest with myself and say, I don't have to make this kind of money, number one, and I can make money doing different things. If I just put the money aside for a second and realize that, if I took all the same skill sets, all the things that have made me successful, combined with this new desire to give back and to help, there's got to be a way for me to do something different here. And so ultimately what that led to was I did quit the corporate world. I was, I got certified in coaching. I did a ton of, I was already doing a ton of personal development work while I was in the corporate world. I added another 30 hours a week to facilitating workshops and doing very spiritual energy type work, stuff that was a stretch for me, what I would call being, like being and stateful type work.
Were you doing that inside the corporate environment or on the side?
No, I was doing that on the side, and it wasn't even as
30 hours.
Yeah, wow. It wasn't even, and I wasn't even doing it as a business. I wasn't, getting paid to do it. I was actually I was a student of it, and then actually participated as a mentor facilitator of it as well.
Cool.
And that's when I started to learn about coaching, and that's when I ultimately said, okay, I'm going to quit my job, and wasn't 100% I was going to do coaching quite yet, but I was looking at maybe going into therapy, opening halfway houses, focusing on just recovery, maybe focusing on corporate people that were just like me that maybe didn't have addictions, but were going through that midlife crisis, asking the questions, knowing they weren't serving their life's purpose, and they just didn't know how to make the shift and change. And so ultimately what it led to was when I looked at all the different options, and I decided that I wanted to be a life coach. And so I left the corporate world. I started a life coaching business. And then as I started growing in that, and I did center literally my target market, if you were corporate folks in their 30s and 40s, mainly males that would come to me and say, hey, Andy, how did you do what you did? How did you get out of this? And how did you recover? I'm not a drug addict, but I cheated on my wife. I'm miserable. I have everything I want. And, I'm a good guy doing bad things. How can you help me? And that was it. And so I focused on that for about a year. And then ultimately I became a student of online marketing, and I wanted to grow my business and do group coaching and online programs. And I wanted to become a speaker, and I wanted to be like you and be a podcaster. And, one thing led to another. I entered another journey, hired Nick Gunsworth from Life on Fire and started to enter the journey of taking my coaching practice to a blend of life and business coaching. And ultimately figuring out how, now that I did what I said I wanted to do, which is I'm in service to helping people, how can I kind of take myself and my business to the next level while also doing that?
Amazing stuff. Andy, I think that the stuff that you teach is something that is critical in this world, and it needs to be taught right alongside science and math and all this stuff that we teach way too much of to kids, because this stuff is actually way more important. When folks are listening to this and they want to hear more of that, they want more of this stuff that Andy is talking about, where can they go to get more of that?
Yeah, absolutely. Well, I do have a podcast, like I just mentioned earlier. I entered the world of podcasting back in June, and it's called Game Time with Andy Zitzman. It's on iTunes and Stitcher, or you can go to the website GameTimeMovement.com. And I have all of, very similar to you, my friend. I have my show notes and all of my podcasts right there on the website. And again, Game Time with Andy Zitzman. It's a daily motivational and inspirational podcast, 3 to 5 minutes. I keep it short and sweet so that I can just give a daily dose, if you will, of motivation, inspiration, or what I like to call empowering information. So, it was actually, you talked about my morning process, Jeff. I wanted to create something that I could add to someone's morning process. And so, I always like having motivation in the morning. I go to YouTube, I watch a video, I listen to a podcast. So I figured, you know what? Why not create a short, sweet, to the point podcast that can help someone get fired up in the morning? And that's what it is. So it's called Game Time with Andy Zitzman. And, again, it's on iTunes and Stitcher Radio, as well as the website, GameTimeMovement.com.
Excellent. Andy, tell us what type of person might want to contact you about coaching or help with starting a business or anything like that?
Yeah, absolutely. So, where I was in the past, I was more of a life coach and kind of, working with people that were in the corporate world and looking to exit or looking to just, improve their personal life while sustaining, if you will, Jeff, in the corporate world. But what I do today actually is about 3 months ago, I partnered with my man, AJ Amex. AJ has been an expert in helping entrepreneurs launch a program, a product, or a service in 90 days or less. And so as I went through my entrepreneurial journey and have learned all these things about online marketing, social media, doing launches, creating products, all that type of stuff, along with my own journey around public speaking and trying to build a business there as well. What I decided to do was I wanted to help people that were now already have either made the leap or are about to make the leap into being an entrepreneur, and to actually not only coach them on those life skills that we talked about primarily on the show today, but to be able to add in and help them shortcut the business skills that it takes to build the foundation for your business and to piece it all together. And so in partnering with AJ, I can do that because whereas I know strategy, I know sales, I know mindset, I know all those things, and those are so important in being an entrepreneur. But as important in the short term is learning where to invest and how to invest your dollars so that you get the right foundation built from a website perspective, your email copy, how to interact with your audience through social media, and all those things that I think a lot of us kind of like, we pick one, we learn one, then we pick the other, we learn the other, and it could take you a good year before you have the whole foundation built and everything's connected. And so my goal and my desire these days is to continue coaching people on that personal mindset and life skills, but to add in the business skills so they can shortcut the process to ultimately fulfilling that dream, right? Because people make the leap. And, so many people, once they actually make the leap, which is huge in and of itself, to then be able to feel confident and certain that they're going to make it, having the right foundation in place and the right strategy and the right tactical skill sets immediately will really help someone build that confidence and make it happen a lot quicker. So that's what I do, and that's called Game Time as well. If you go to GameTimeMovement.com, you'll see that AJ and I are there. We do coaching one-on-one. We also have an online course called Game Time University, which is a self-paced course that also comes with a little bit of group coaching as well. A lot lower price, great way to start. But if you really want to shortcut the process and build your business in 90 days or less, AJ and I do some great one-on-one coaching, and we do a lot of the work with you or for you so that if you're not technical, you can start to learn this technical game pretty quickly.
Excellent stuff. Andy, thanks so much for being on the show, and I so enjoyed this one. I really appreciate that, in many ways you've kind of been to hell and back, and I think that what will make us better as a human race is if we take those experiences that we have and we use them to help other people to live better lives. And that's exactly what you're doing. You're just modeling the way I believe humanity should work. So first of all, thank you for that. Thank you for being on the show. I wish you the best of luck, and I can't wait to see what happens next with you and Game Time and AJ and all the great things you got going on.
Jeff, man, I want to say thank you very much. And I didn't get to say a lot about you specifically, so I would like to end with this, which is, I in watching your video and just seeing what you're all about and the way that you're able to articulate the three areas of our life, the living, the sustaining, and the building, and knowing that we have to increase the living and ultimately have the sustaining and the building decreased but also overlapped with the living is the ultimate path to true happiness. And the fact that you figured that out for yourself and now you're in service to helping others figure it out is, I just want to tell you, I feel the same way about you, brother, and I honor you for that, man. And I'm glad we're connected. Really appreciate being here.
Love talking to Andy. Great advice. I am very passionate about this whole idea that we need to have positive, inspirational, motivational things going into our head on a regular basis. And what I love about Andy's podcast is he has kept it really, really short, 3 to 5 minutes. And what a great way to start the day off with something positive, motivating, and you can learn something from. I think that's just a great thing. What if, here's a business idea I'll throw out for somebody. What if there was some software that let you take a podcast like Andy and actually hook it into your phone somehow so that became your alarm clock every morning, right? So that there was something that allowed you to have that positive, inspirational message, brand new one every single day, be your alarm clock. What a great idea. Who knows if anybody wants that. As we talk about here in How to Quit Working, you can't just come up with great ideas and then throw them out there and see if anybody wants it. You got to actually figure out if it's a good idea. But if anybody wants to take that and run with it, go for it. I think everybody needs to wake up with something positive, inspirational, and Andy's podcast is a great way to do that. So go to GameTimeMovement.com and get hooked up with Andy. Also go over to the How to Quit Working group on Facebook, howtoquitworking.com/group, and that will send you right over to Facebook where you can click Join Group and jump in the conversation with other people just like you who are quitting their job and starting a business. And I will talk to you next time on another episode of the How to Quit Working Show.
Thanks for joining us on the How to Quit Working Show. Tune in next time when we'll talk to another amazing person just like you who is now living the ultimate life of freedom and doing it on their terms. If you want to learn how to quit working and get these episodes delivered directly to you, visit howtoquitworkingshow.com.